My name is Mabel Donovan. I am 67 years old, a widow, and once believed my greatest challenge in life was learning how to live without my husband Robert. But nothing could have prepared me for the moment my own family decided my existence was worth less than their inheritance. The sun shimmered across the Delaware River that morning. I stood on the deck of a gleaming white yacht, the kind that seemed too extravagant for a simple outing. I told myself this was Daniel's way of reconnecting. My son had not invited me anywhere in months, and when his call came warm and direct, I let my heart believe he cared. He promised a family afternoon, just him, me, and his wife Vanessa. Vanessa moved behind me with steps too soft to hear. Her perfume, sharp and sweet, lingered near my shoulder as she leaned close. "Say hello to the river, Mabel," she whispered, her breath icy against my ear. Before I could turn, 2 hands pressed hard against my back. The world tilted. My hips, still tender from surgery, screamed as I stumbled forward. Cold water swallowed me whole. My dress grew heavy, dragging me downward, while the shock of the river tore the air from my lungs. I kicked wildly, desperate for breath. I looked up through the blur of water and sunlight. Just feet away on the deck, my son stood still. Daniel did not move. He did not cry out. His face was calm, almost blank, but the faint curve at his lips told me everything. This was no accident. My child wanted me gone. As the current pulled me farther, the betrayal burned worse than the freezing water. I thought of Robert, of the empire we had built together from nothing, and of the hope I had carried that Daniel still needed his mother. The truth hit harder than the fall. He did not see me as a mother. He saw me as an obstacle. But let me take you back. Let me show you how an ordinary Tuesday morning turned into betrayal so sharp it nearly carved me out of existence. After Robert passed away 2 years ago, the company we had built together from scratch became mine alone. Donovan Logistics was no small venture. It was an empire worth nearly $2.5 billion. To the outside world, I was the image of success, a strong widow, a businesswoman in control of a legacy. But in private, I was a mother struggling to hold on to the one bond that mattered most. Daniel had grown up in privilege. He knew the sound of boardroom applause and the glitter of country club dinners long before he understood what it meant to work. I tried to remind him that wealth meant responsibility, that the Donovan name had been carved from hard labor, not entitlement, but my words often fell flat. Still, I held on to hope. A mother always does. When Daniel called me that Tuesday morning, I let myself believe it was more than a polite gesture. His voice carried a boyish warmth I had not heard in years. "Mom," he said, "let's celebrate your recovery from surgery. Just us, you, me, and Vanessa, we have the boat waiting." My chest swelled with cautious joy. I told myself this was his way of reaching out, of saying that despite the distance, I was still his mother, and not just a bank account. I chose my navy dress, the one Robert always loved. He used to say it brought out the brightness in my eyes. I pinned my hair carefully, dabbed perfume on my wrists, and looked in the mirror with a spark of hope. For a moment I was not a lonely widow. I was a mother invited back into her son's life. But loneliness has a way of clouding judgment. It makes you reach for kindness even in the sharpest of smiles. I should have heard the danger in Daniel's voice. I should have seen the cold in Vanessa's eyes. Instead, I chose to believe. That choice nearly cost me everything. The yacht gleamed under the mid-morning sun, its polished deck almost blinding as I stepped aboard. Daniel greeted me with a hug that felt rehearsed, stiff, more like a performance than an embrace. Vanessa lingered a few steps behind him, her smile sharp as glass, a smile that did not reach her eyes. For a little while I tried to relax. The river sparkled around us, calm and inviting. Daniel poured champagne into tall flutes, raising a glass as though we were celebrating something meaningful. I lifted mine too, pretending not to notice the way his gaze slid past me, unfocused, as if I were not really there. We made small talk, weather, business, idle chatter about the latest charity gala. Yet beneath the surface of every word, I felt something heavier, a tension that clung to the air like smoke. I pushed it aside. I told myself this was family and family deserved trust. But when Vanessa stepped closer, her heels clicking softly against the wood, my body stiffened. She looked out at the horizon, her voice smooth. "It's beautiful out here, isn't it, Mabel?" I nodded, distracted by the gentle sway of the boat, and then, without warning, her tone dropped to a whisper. "Say hello to the river." Her hands shoved against my back. Pain shot through my hip as I stumbled forward. The rail vanished beneath my palms. Then the world turned upside down. and icy water slammed into me like a wall. I gasped, but the river swallowed the sound. My lungs burned, my arms thrashed, but the weight of my dress pulled me down. When I broke the surface, sputtering, I turned toward the yacht, toward Daniel. He stood there, perfectly still, no panic, no shock, only that faint, cruel curve at the corner of his lips. A smile that told me everything. This was no accident. My son had chosen this. He had chosen money over blood, inheritance over love. And as the river pulled me farther away, I realized I was no longer his mother. To him, I was simply an obstacle to be erased. The river dragged me down again and again, each wave colder than the last. My arms screamed with the effort of keeping afloat, my lungs begging for air. I was seconds away from surrendering when a shadow cut across the sunlight. A rusted fishing boat crested around the bend. A man in his 60s leaned over the railing, his weathered face tightening in alarm. "Hold on," he shouted, his voice rough but urgent. Beside him, a lanky teenager scrambled for a rope. The line slapped the water near me. I clawed for it with trembling hands, and with a heave I was dragged across the side of the boat. I collapsed on the deck, coughing up river water, my body shaking violently. The older man dropped a wool blanket over my shoulders. "Name's Franklin Doyle," he said, his gray eyes sharp and assessing. He motioned to the boy. "This here is my grandson, Ethan. We were out for stripers, not rescuing drowning ladies, but looks like the river had other plans." I tried to speak, but all I managed was a broken whisper. "It wasn't an accident. My family, they tried to kill me." Ethan's eyes widened. Franklin studied me a long moment, not with disbelief but with calculation. "That's a heavy thing to say," he muttered. I gripped his arm, desperate. "Please, don't tell anyone you found me. Not yet. If they know I survived, they'll finish what they started." The old fisherman weighed my words in silence. Finally, he gave a slow nod. "Sometimes the right thing isn't what the law says." "Fine, you stay quiet. We'll say it was driftwood we saw. But you'd better tell me the whole story." Wrapped in that scratchy blanket, shivering but alive, I felt clarity cutting through the fog. Daniel and Vanessa thought I was gone, swallowed by the river. Good. Let them believe it. Because while they mourned a ghost, I would be preparing for war. 4 days later, wrapped in a borrowed black veil, I stood at the edge of Greenwood Cemetery. From the shade of an oak tree, I watched my own funeral. The silver casket gleamed under the autumn sun, absurdly expensive for a body that was not inside. Rows of mourners filled the seats, neighbors, church friends, even Robert's old colleagues, most of them crying genuine tears for the woman they believed was gone. At the front stood Daniel and Vanessa, dressed head to toe in black. Daniel's eyes glistened on cue as he shook hands with reporters. Vanessa dabbed at her cheeks with a silk handkerchief, tilting her face just enough for the cameras to capture the perfect shot of grief. To the world, they were the picture of dutiful children. To me, they were actors on a stage built out of my supposed death. When the service ended, I bit my lip until I tasted blood. Let them bury an empty box. Let them spin their story about my confusion and decline. While they sold the lie, I would be gathering the truth. That night, Franklin drove me back to Princeton, to the Donovan estate where I had spent 35 years of my life. My hand shook as I slipped the old brass key into the back door lock. Daniel had never asked for it back. Why would he? As far as he knew, his mother lay at the bottom of the Delaware. Inside, the house smelled different. Gone was Robert's cologne, replaced by the sterile scent of expensive cleaners and something artificial. Furniture was covered with sheets, but underneath I spotted new leather couches and a massive entertainment system, extravagance I never would have allowed. Upstairs, in Robert's old study, I found what I was searching for. Papers were spread across the desk, binders stacked high. At the very top, stamped in bold black letters, was a folder labeled Project Mabel. My stomach clenched as I flipped through it. Page after page detailed supposed memory lapses, hallucinations, and signs of mental decline. My name was scrawled across each report, some with forged signatures, others verified by doctors I had never met. I remembered the moments they described: Vanessa whispering the wrong date of an appointment, Daniel swapping pill bottles when I wasn't looking. Every mistake had been staged. They weren't just trying to steal my fortune. They were rewriting who I was. And then, just as rage surged through me, a sound froze me in place, soft, fragile, unmistakable. The cry of a baby drifting from the second floor. I stood frozen in the study, the folder clutched to my chest, while the sound of crying echoed through the halls. Daniel and Vanessa had no children. They had always insisted their careers left no time for parenthood. So whose child was in my house? Heart pounding, I climbed the staircase, every creak under my feet like a warning. The cries grew louder, pulling me toward the guest bedroom Vanessa had always hated. She used to say it smelled old, like the past. Now the door stood slightly ajar. Inside, the room had been transformed. The wallpaper was gone, replaced by pastel clouds. A white crib sat against the far wall, draped with a soft canopy. Shelves lined with brand new toys and stuffed animals glowed in the dim light. And there, swaddled in an expensive blanket, lay a baby no older than a few weeks, his face flushed red with need. My knees weakened. I stepped closer, staring down at the tiny child. My mind reeled. Vanessa's slim figure on the yacht just days ago proved she hadn't given birth. So how had this baby arrived here? Headlights flashed across the window. A car door slammed outside. Panic surged through me. Daniel and Vanessa were home. I stumbled back down the stairs, clutching the disposable camera Franklin had given me. I had only seconds to escape. By the time their voices floated through the front door, I was slipping out the back into the cold night air. My breath tore at my lungs as I ran to the corner where Franklin's truck waited. I tumbled inside, gasping. "There's a baby," I choked out. "In the house. A newborn." Franklin's brows shot up. "A baby? Whose?" "I don't know," I whispered. "But it isn't theirs." The next morning, Franklin introduced me to someone he trusted. Laura Kane, a private investigator with sharp eyes and a steady voice. I told her everything, every detail from the folder to the nursery. When I mentioned the baby, her expression hardened. "I know a place that fits this pattern," Laura said. "A private clinic across the state line. They handle surrogacy discreet, expensive, and dangerous." Within days, she returned with proof. The child in my old house had been born 3 weeks earlier. His mother was Anna Rivera, a 17-year-old runaway from Pennsylvania. Anna had died during delivery. The clinic called it cardiac arrest. Laura called it too convenient. I stared at the photo of Anna so young, smiling shyly at the camera. My hands trembled. Daniel and Vanessa had not only betrayed me, they had stolen a life. The file Laura handed me felt heavier than stone. Anna Rivera's smiling face stared back, frozen in time, a teenager whose future had been traded away. My heart ached for her, but anger soon replaced grief. Daniel and Vanessa didn't have the cunning to orchestrate something this elaborate. Someone else had pulled the strings. Laura dug deeper. She traced property records, legal filings, and the so-called clinic's financial ties. One name surfaced again and again, like a shadow that refused to disappear: Claudia Mercer. On the surface, Mercer was a respected estate attorney in Newark. Her reputation was impeccable: polished suits, glowing recommendations, families praising her guidance through the difficult transitions of inheritance. But Laura's research painted a darker picture. Dozens of wealthy clients had died under strangely convenient circumstances. Widows and widowers who supposedly slipped drowned or faded quietly. Always just when their heirs were impatient for control. Always with Claudia Mercer somewhere nearby, her name hidden in the paperwork. "She's not just a lawyer," Laura explained, spreading photographs across Franklin's kitchen table. "She's running a network. She recruits greedy relatives, manufactures evidence of mental decline, and makes sure the inheritance path is cleared. I've tracked at least 20 suspicious deaths tied to her clients in the past 5 years." My stomach turned cold as I studied the pictures. Claudia stepping from luxury cars, shaking hands with men in tailored suits, slipping unnoticed into hospitals and private clinics. Always present, never implicated. "So she is the mastermind," I whispered, and my son delivered me straight into her hands. Laura pointed to a grainy photo of Claudia leaving the same clinic where Anna Rivera had died. Witnesses claimed she oversaw the birth herself. The baby survived. Anna did not. A chill ran through me. The betrayal of my son already cut deep, but this was monstrous. I was no longer fighting for my own survival. I was fighting against a machine that devoured the vulnerable and disguised murder as inheritance planning. Laura's voice was steady but grim. "Claudia thinks you're dead, Mabel. She's already moving fast, pushing probate through the courts. Within weeks, your estate will be in Daniel and Vanessa's hands, and that child will be her perfect cover story." I clenched my fists. "Then she doesn't know me at all. If Claudia Mercer is the spider in this web, I'll walk straight into it, and I'll tear it apart from the center." The decision came to me one sleepless night at Franklin's kitchen table. Hiding would not save me. Claudia Mercer was too powerful, too careful. If I wanted justice, I had to bring her into the open. I would make her believe I was vulnerable, desperate, and broken. Then she would talk and the world would hear it. Laura hated the plan. Franklin called it madness, but they both knew I was right. Mercer needed to see me as weak to let her guard down. So we set the trap inside the very house Daniel and Vanessa had stolen from me. Hidden recorders were placed in the study and living room, small red lights blinking in the dark. Federal agents waited quietly nearby, ready to move when the time came. I positioned myself in Robert's old armchair, the same spot where he used to read the paper every morning. My heart pounded, but my hands were steady. At 7 sharp, the front door opened. Daniel stepped inside, keys slipping from his hand when his eyes met mine. He froze, color draining from his face. Vanessa's scream pierced the silence, raw and sharp, as though she were staring at a ghost. "Hello, darling," I said calmly. "Did you miss me?" Before either of them could respond, another figure swept into the room, Claudia Mercer. She carried herself with chilling authority, her tailored suit flawless, her gaze cold and assessing. "Well," she said smoothly, "the woman who refuses to die." She set a leather portfolio on the coffee table and looked at me as though I were nothing more than an inconvenience. "This is unwise, Mrs. Donovan. Very unwise." I folded my hands in my lap. "Is it unwise, or is it unwise for you to sit here and admit what you've been doing?" Her smile was thin, cruel. "You think you've cornered me? I provide a service. Families want freedom from burdens. I make it clean, efficient, legal. Call it estate acceleration if you like. The old pass sooner. The young inherit sooner. Everyone wins." Daniel swallowed hard. Vanessa clung to his arm, trembling. "You've murdered people," I said quietly. "Dozens, and tonight the world is going to hear you say it." As if on cue, the windows shattered with the crash of boots and shouted commands. Agents swarmed through every entrance. Chaos filled the room as Claudia's empire collapsed in the very house she thought she controlled. The living room erupted into a storm of voices and movement. Agents in dark jackets pinned Claudia Mercer to the floor before she could reach the back door. Her leather portfolio scattered across the rug, pages of contracts and forged documents spilling out like broken wings. "Claudia Mercer," one agent barked, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, wire fraud, and elder abuse." Claudia's lips curled into a bitter smile, but she said nothing. She had built her life on control, yet in that moment she was nothing more than another criminal in handcuffs. Daniel and Vanessa sat frozen on the sofa, their faces pale, their perfect act of grief stripped away. When the agents turned to them, the silence was deafening. "Daniel Donovan," the officer's voice rang clear, "you are under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy." Daniel's eyes darted toward me, filled with panic. "Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." But it had. He had chosen greed over love, silence over truth, betrayal over family. The months that followed were a blur of courtrooms and testimony. Claudia Mercer was convicted on all counts and sentenced to life without parole. Her network unraveled, exposing corrupt doctors, lawyers, even a probate judge who had played their parts in her scheme. Daniel and Vanessa faced their reckoning too. Both accepted plea deals, 25 years for Daniel, 20 for Vanessa. Their wealth, their influence, everything they thought they had gained slipped through their fingers. Yet the most important battle was not in criminal court. It was in family court, where I petitioned for custody of the baby boy Ana Rivera had brought into this world. I stood before the judge, the child nestled in my arms. His eyes, dark and solemn, someone so small, studied me with quiet trust. "His name will be Samuel Rivera Donovan," I said softly. "Rivera for the mother who gave him life. Donovan for the family who will love him, not use him." The gavel struck. Custody granted. For the first time in months, I felt hope rise above the ashes of betrayal. 5 years have passed since that night. The mansion no longer belongs to Daniel and Vanessa. It is Samuel's home, now a place filled with laughter, toys scattered across the floor, and the kind of warmth money can never buy. Samuel is a bright, curious child. He asks endless questions, some too big for his age. I have never hidden the truth from him. He knows that his birth mother, Ana Rivera, was a brave young girl who wanted him to live. He knows the people who tried to raise him were not family, only thieves blinded by greed. And he knows that love, real love, is not about bloodlines but about choices. At night, When I tuck him into bed, I sometimes remember the river, the icy water, the crushing weight of betrayal, the cold hands that tried to drag me under. Those memories could have broken me, but instead they remind me why I survived. I survived for Samuel. I survived to prove that no scheme, no betrayal, no empire of lies can silence a mother's strength. Family is not the people who share your name. Family is the people who choose you, who protect you, who stand beside you when the current rises. So here I am, not just Mabel Donovan, widow of Robert or mother of Daniel. I am a grandmother by choice, guardian by love, and survivor by will. And if this story touched you, if it reminded you of the strength it takes to stand against betrayal, I ask you to share it. Like this video, subscribe for more, and comment the city you are watching from. Because every time we speak these truths, we remind someone else that they are not alone, and that real family is built, not inherited.